today we have with us, both of them are the directors in the libraries here at the University of Kentucky. One is Shawn Livingston, who is the director of public...
Well, you can just say William T. Young Library now.
Yeah, William T. Young Library, that's just an easier way to say it. And then the other is Valerie, who is the director of branches and the head of the agricultural library. And they are basically going to talk today about the things that you should be putting on your resume and helping you kind of get an idea of what your resume should look like if you're looking to be hired in libraries. Thank you. They'll be good.
Okay. So I've been supervising SLA students that work in the ag library since '98, and some time ago I developed something kind of quirky called Valerie's Vita Tips, and I've just changed it over time, but it's really informal. But I thought that actually that would work well for this group. And last time I did. Oh, that was this is a. I thought it would work well for this group again, and we'll have that posted a little bit later. Megan's going to put that up. Also, what I have in this stack are some examples. Now, most of my experience is recent experience, last 10, 15 years has been writing Vitas. I haven't written a resume probably in 20 years. But I did get permission for one resume, and I'll have some more up on the site. But this is Alex Griggs, and he's at the Lexmark Library. Then I have recent graduates of this program who worked for me, and I have their Vitas, and all but one are currently employed. Just to give you examples, because part of what I want you to see is all the variations. And then we have kind of this next phase. I put mine on top, just not because it's most important, but there's a couple things I wanted to remember. This is mine, our boss, Stacy, who's an administrator, Angel Clemens and James Manasco, who are Kentucky chapter officers, but they're a little bit later in the career than that last batch. So there are those.
So there are 4 examples. We'll take a look at each example of this.
So when we did this last time, it was really kind of informal, and we have some points we'd like to cover, but at any time we'll answer questions. And kind of follow some of what's on the Vita tips, but really we're just here to cover what you need. Before you even think about resume versus Vita, you need to be thinking about what else you should be doing now. We decided to look at this as kind of career management. So hopefully you're already doing this, but if you're not, start lining up your references.
Yes.
There are particular faculty members that I know with online it's a little different than when Shawn and Joe and I all went through. Is we had face-to-face classes. We saw our instructors all the time. We would have breaks with them, that kind of thing. With online, you're going to have to take more effort to get to know the faculty members so they can give a reference for you.
And speaking of faculty members, be really selective on which ones you choose. You know, what Valerie said, once you've gotten to know and you have kind of a personal relationship who can speak to your work outside your classwork that you've done things for, go a lot farther than the folks who write us a letter and say, oh, they were excellent students, they did all their papers on time. Because to be honest with you, kind of from a search committee standpoint, and I'll talk more about that later, those kind of go to the big pile and not the small pile, and you always want to be in the small pile, okay?
Right.
So just be selective with the faculty, and then with that, get to know people you work with. I know it's kind of hard in this economic time because we've cut back on the number of students we hire just because of budgets, but if any chance you can, go meet some folks who are practicing so you can get them to be your references.
Well, and also not only where you work, but where you volunteer or being part of a professional organization, you know, like SLA and ALA and the others. I got an email today from one of your fellow students that asked me about field experience. Well, not only is that going to help me get work done I need to get done, but then I know I'll be writing a reference afterwards. So that gets experience for that person without having worked for me for pay. And then I can use whatever credentials I have. So as president of the SLA Kentucky chapter, as director of branch libraries, I'll make it look the best I can. I'm just assuming you're going to do a great job given who it is. So ask, not only start lining up your references, but ask for advice. Ask them, and ask librarians and different types of information professionals whether you work with them or not. So if you need help in finding those, then go to your student leaders or come to us, and we can help find people for you. We have people like in the Kentucky chapter that would love to be a mentor, but haven't been asked in a long time. So if you have an interest in news, or if you have an interest in law librarianship, we've got several. Corporate librarianship, anything like that. Academic, public. Public will know some, school will know fewer, but we know who to send you to that can help you. So it's never too late to ask or too early. Just do it. And then they'll help you all along also with proofreading and getting your materials together. I would assume that by now, especially if you're taking management, you're reading ads. Remember some of those assignments? But you need to do that for a variety of reasons, and it's, I think in reading ads, it began to give me a better sense of what's out there, what I should be gaining as experience, but if nothing else, you'll get the lingo down. What are they calling things? And try to, that may influence what courses you take, what paid and unpaid jobs you do, and what professional organizations you belong to, where you'll meet and network with the right people.
That's very important also because, as you know, we've been in class, the profession's changing, so you don't want to be prepping yourself for something that probably isn't needed anymore. For instance, we still use catalogers and use them a lot, but you may not want to type index cards, the catalog cards like we had to learn. I think we didn't have to learn that, thank goodness. But you may want to learn more about metadata and how that interacts with electronic resources database, how that interfaces with the catalog so people can find material. So always plan and see where the profession's heading. Because if you don't, you're going to be kind of out there and just figure out, well, I've got all these skills and no job. A prime example is reference librarians. People think we're dead, we're not. It's just that we've morphed to what we're doing. Okay, we're doing a lot more information literacy. So read the ads and look for people who are going to teach folks how to use and then evaluate information and tailor your coursework toward that. So even though you don't have a chance to teach, you may have coursework that can back up and somehow say, well, they've done some other things and we can take this and apply it to it.
And we've gotten a green light recently to have volunteers.
Yes.
So we have to tread very carefully there, but that, in case you've heard, that's not possible. That has changed since the unconference. So that was, and we knew that was coming about that time, but yeah, we're real excited. And it won't be just Shawn and I, but we could help point you to people that could really use you and that would be good experience for you. Or maybe even outside of UK as well. You can practice leadership without having to be a supervisor. And a prime example is your heads of your student organizations. I learned some of my best leadership skills in professional organizations. And then when I did move up, I felt more confident in my skills. And it was kind of the safe place to fail. I mean, I didn't want to fail, but it's an easy place to learn. And you have a lot of people to help you along the way. So if you're not already involved in professional organizations, I would do that as soon as possible. Attending conferences, workshops, other types of professional development as much as your time and finances allow. But there are ways to help you with all of that. There are travel grants out there and conference scholarships for these big annual meetings for the major organizations. And also, that's a great way. So a lot of those include a mentoring component where you're actually going to get more out of the conference if you win the scholarship, not just financially, but as an experience. I know there's the new member roundtable for ALA, does some cool stuff, the larger divisions in SLA. So go to your student leaders or just go directly to the librarians in the UK system or elsewhere that are in those organizations and ask. Don't be shy. Now is the time. The deadlines will probably start this month through February for the summer conferences. So this would be prime time to find out about those.
And when you go to conference, go to the new member meetings, but then also tap some people you want to go hang out with after hours, because you'll find that's where all the good tips are given. Because we all have this script we do like on camera or in public, but then there's the things that we do afterwards where you really get to see things. And so sometimes it's a little bit hard for a lot of folks in librarianship because I'm not always outgoing, but you'll find out that when people get off there, they take off their ties and all that kind of stuff. Occasionally they take off their shirts, but it's another story.
Only one person.
Only one person. They'll tell you a lot more about what's going on and give you the informal things of what their organization is looking for.
And several of you here I know were at the spring conference, so hopefully you'll be mentoring people about how to do that. But you also have in your midst Rebecca here, who came to one of the chapter meetings last summer, it was June. And then she decided she heard enough about that conference. She showed up in July, which I was just stunned, but pleased, super pleased. And so she's been tapped to write an article about that. And she would be a great person for you all to talk to and maybe have speak about that experience. Because she stayed in a hostel with one of our officers, you know. Yeah. So she figured out how. It's Rebecca did the conference.
Yes.
So that's a wonderful example for you all in house. Also, SLA and I'm assuming other organizations have travel tips and stuff like that, and I can get those to Megan to post for you all. But just ways to how to go to the conference, you know, from start to finish. So now would be a good time to share those. I have act like a professional today, and that comes from my own experience. I'm an alum twice. I have my BS in English, yes, BS, because I started out Chemie, got over halfway through at a time when women were not in Chemie at UK. So I decided I could do it, but I really was unhappy. At first I had to prove to the people around me women could do it. It's just a me thing. But anyway, I ended up in a staff position, and as sometimes happens, it was difficult to get out. I didn't have the full support of my supervisor. I think I did a good job. I think that was part of the problem. She didn't want to let go. So fortunately, I participated in a leadership program that just said, be a leader where you are. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? So I began presenting and writing articles, just in Kentucky venues mainly. But that made the difference then of getting my first library job. Because then I wasn't talking about what you should do, what I could do, or what I might do. I'd already done it. And what I was told later is that made a huge difference. So I would tell you the same, is join committees, not just the student committees, but the actual committees of the different associations you're interested in. Or in the library school, if there's a committee you could be on. Repurpose your class assignments and turn them into articles, either a brief newsletter article or a regular journal article. Kentucky Libraries is looking for, from KLA, is looking for articles all the time. And I bet your papers are better than the articles that we've read. I have been on the awards committee for that before. And let me just say, at least for those 2 years, I would have rather have read student papers. And participate in poster sessions or as a conference speaker. We just had that call for spring conference. Hopefully many of you submitted. I know at least 3 people in this room that did. So continue doing that. And there will be another fall conference with KLA in the fall, but there will be national calls soon for the national meetings. And so you could then get even more bang for what money you spend going to that conference if you could speak there. If you do give a poster or a presentation, follow it up with an article. I think not enough people know that early in their career.
Exactly.
You're just sharing your knowledge through a different communication tool. And I like to write second so that, well, first of all, I hate writing, but also I change my article based on the questions I get. So it gives me a sense of what people want to know.
It's multi-purposing your thing. So why do the work twice? I think that's short. You've done the work once and you've got this really killer presentation. You do a little bit extra work. You may have 1, 2, 3 articles out of that. That's how professors get tenure. I mean, it is. It's just what you do.
But change the titles.
Yeah, change the titles.
Not to be deceptive, but really, you're looking at, you're doing a different work. And just, you covered your face. No, I mean, not that it's indistinguishable, but I made the mistake of, I gave a similar but not the same presentation to two different places, state and national. And I didn't know to change the title, but really it was a different presentation with a different focus. So learn from my mistake. And basically what we're talking about here is all of these are ways to expand your skill and experiences to set yourself apart and to be in the small pile that Shawn talked about.
Right.
So now down to the vita versus resume. I mean, what it boils down to is you do what they tell you. If they ask for a vita, you submit the vita. If they ask for the resume, you submit the resume. If they don't say, it's kind of up to you. Some people go short and do the resume, but why not strut your stuff? And because the difference is a resume should really be brief. I've never heard that it should go over more than 2 pages. Sometimes people even say 1 page. But for professional positions, vitas are quite appropriate, and they're exhaustive. They also highlight the best. But as you saw here, it varies from 4 pages to, I think it was James's 20-something pages. And it depends on what institution you're at to how much you put in there. I would not be putting, for UK, what I do at my church.
No.
For him at U of L, somehow he has to show for volunteer experience. So it depends on where you are and what you're applying for to whether you'd include that. But beyond that, until I went up for full professor, I didn't have descriptions under every one of my committees. But I learned from Shawn and Stacy, that's what they did, so that as your file, in this case, moved forward, people knew what you did. Well, I got to thinking about that for Valerie's Vita tips, and I'm thinking, well, with what you are putting on your Vita, since it's not going to be as full yet, if you could describe your work. So Megan would talk about helping with this. I'm picking her because I know what not because she works for me, but she can talk about planning Young Conference with those of you that were on that. She can talk about helping with the Lunch and Learn. She can be very specific instead of just having one line that she was the student president. Does that make sense?
And here's the other thing about Vitas. I think right now I have 2 versions. I've got the long, comprehensive one that's in my university personnel file, and then I'm working on making a shorter one that kind of highlights the last 5 to 10 years. You're not at that stage yet. We got to keep that in mind. And that also means that you're probably going to end up with 2 or 3 versions of your resume.
Yeah.
Okay, that's tailored. That can be easily tailored. I've seen a lot of folks who just do one, and that's what they send out. And if everything on that is not what I'm looking for, and I've got to wade through a lot of crap, you go in the big pile, and I come back to it. So I know that's a lot of work. It's just like cover letters, and I take to do cover letters for each individual job. You should have 2 or 3 copies of your resume ready to go that you can just tweak in like 5 to 10 minutes, email it out, stuff it in the envelope, and be done with it.
So do you think in terms of the Vita there should be a cutoff though? Like, I mean, 20 pages, does that not seem excessive? If you're, so you're not a big pile?
You're not going to worry about that yet.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even have 2 pages, so I'm not worried about it.
Well, it depends.
It depends.
Because, in England they call it a curriculum vitae, which is the actual thing. So it is your academic's life story. So it should be long. And so if a job asks for one and they put no limits, then you send them everything you got. Because you never know that thing you did 20 years ago might be the thing that tricks you to get you that job. Because, oh, they did this, I remember this. So you just have to really be patient. Now, a Vita is kind of like a lifelong thing, and I'm really bad about updating mine. We have to at University of Kentucky because they require us to turn a new one in every year to see what we've been doing. So but I know Valerie's real good at it. Stacy is incredible about it. Stacy does hers every week. Whenever she does something that goes on there, she takes a couple of minutes and throws it on there, which is a better way to do it. My mind doesn't work that way. So I just kind of push it off until that 6 months before that year time to go and collapse everything. It also brings up another point about constructing Vitas. If you don't already keep a calendar, either in paper or Google Calendar, iCal, something that you can go back and look at all your things. I can't tell you how many times when I need to add an event, I've been saved by that little cryptic note I put on my calendar. I said, oh, that's what that presentation was. I can go back to my stuff and pull out what I did. So kind of a diary. You had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, when you talk about being exhaustive, I mean, should we be including anything we did as an undergraduate? And what about previous professional experience that maybe doesn't apply to the library work? Like, I have management experience prior to coming to graduate school.
You should put that on there. And this is your prime case. There might be 2 or 3 copies of your resume you keep. One that tells all the management, particularly if the job you're applying for is overseeing some students, something like that, because you want to have that there because you want to stand out from that. Now, if it's a job where you're going to be an entry-level information literacy person, you may want to also keep that management experience, but not highlight it as much, because what that shows, then they can trust you to go out and do stuff. They can give you an assignment and you'll take care of it because you know how to organize yourself.
But you also probably are more promotable,
Yes.
having supervised people before. And so
Yeah.
I would definitely include it. It's just a matter, like he said, how much to include for each job.
Yeah.
Okay. And it could maybe be a way of reorganizing, you know, you said you had different copies, maybe one highlights it further up than the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about with undergraduate experience? Would you include things like that?
If it's relevant, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's relevant, include it, because that's the kind of thing that kind of brings you again to the small piles. Like, oh, they've got all this other experience doing this kind of stuff, and we can apply that. For instance, I don't hire grad assistants anymore, but when I did, first thing I looked for, I didn't look to see if you worked in a library. I looked to see if you had retail experience, because that means you could deal with people. We could teach you all the other stuff, but it's very hard to teach somebody how to deal with an irate patron who can't get on a computer at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, okay? But, so that's the kind of thing. And so those students that come in, I would look, whether it was in a bookstore or, you know, daycare or something, they dealt with people, okay, they go to this pile, and I'll start looking at it. So just, it depends. So you guys have to read those ads very closely.
Right. And when I was still using a resume, one of my best bits of experience was at McGraw-Hill being a project manager. But then when I came back to Kentucky, I was a waitress, I did a switchboard operator, all that kind of stuff. So the advice I got was to move that to the top, call it career-related employment. And then the rest of it still kept, was in chrono order, just with that bit pulled out. And also I was warned not to have gaps, especially as a woman. It's just, I think it's more, it's better to be consistent and be, you know, list all your employment. That may mean also listing volunteer parts that fill that gap, but try to have as few gaps as possible. Not that the guys can get away with gaps too, but I think sometimes they're more critical. They're trying to figure out, you know, whether you have children or not, or this or that. There's interesting things that can go on.
Speaking to undergrad experience, do you have different advice if someone got their undergraduate degree, say 12 years ago or 15 years ago? Would it be less important for them to then include undergrad experience?
It would barely be, if it was really relevant, again, then I would include it. If it wasn't relevant, then I'd probably leave it off. Because, like Valerie said, the time period on your resume, giving your education, will cover that time in your work history. They won't stick out to me. Stick out to somebody reviewing that. But again, if it's just if you spent time not, you know, doing something job related. So say if you were in archives and you were a photographer during that time period, or you worked for the paper, then you might include that if you're applying for a digital archives job, because that means you understand light and how things function and all that kind of stuff. But you might have to minimize it as much. I get kind of suspicious, I think Valerie does too, if this person's been out for a while and it's all I see is undergraduate experience, then the radar goes off in the back of my head. Then I'm on the phone.
What were they doing?
Yeah, then I'm on the phone calling my friends and email and says, do you know this person? Where were they? What were they doing? That kind of stuff. You're trying to get yourself in that small pile with good stuff and not the small pile that goes in the trash with bad stuff. Okay.
So to dig into the Vita part a little bit more, which would also work for some with the resume, is I used the font I did here actually kind of as a joke the first time I did it, as an example of don't be cute. But then I kind of liked it, so I stuck with it because I thought it's an example of what not to do. Also, you'll see there's stars, it's heavy text. Don't do that. So I have an example right there in front of you, not using white space appropriately. Be careful of the font size and style. The great thing about Avita is you don't have to make it so small to make it fit into 2 pages. So spread that font out. Use those white spaces. That's one of the reasons I want you to look at these and how people used italics and underlines and how they typically have the same font all the way through, but they do different things with it. So because you don't want it to be jarring. For date order, I've seen it both ways, but I think that what you've done most recently should be most important, and I would highly recommend reverse chronological order wherever possible.
Don't make us hunt for it. Don't make the people you're going to go hunt for your information.
I think people don't want us to hire them when they put their oldest stuff first.
Yeah, exactly. But then that tricks me, that go off in my head. It's like, well, what have they been doing recently if this is the most current stuff that's up here?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the thing is, first impressions are so important. You really don't want to blow it that way, So, and it's very simple. Grammar and spelling too. Have proofreaders. You're going to get to a point where you just can't see the errors, and people judge your intelligence, unfortunately, sometimes on how you appear in paper, and that's just the way it is. And as a native Kentuckian, I've seen time and time again where people were misunderstood or misjudged because of how they spelled or their grammar, or if they pronounced a few words in the way that wasn't anticipated. So it's things to work on. You can overcome that, but just use your proofreaders. And just the simple stuff, we shouldn't have to say it, but yet we've seen it, is choose your page breaks carefully and dangling dates and all that. Just like, is this something you're really proud of how this looks? You probably put that much effort into your class papers, put more than that into your Avitas and resumes.
That rule about one line that you learned in English class about never leaving one line at the top of a page by itself, that applies very much so in resumes. Because, again, you have to think, for most of you guys, when you get out, you're going to be in a very large pool. It's a tight market and a lot of people are applying. So search committees are going to use all kinds of different ways to get that down to the small pile.
Well, and another thing to think about is more and more you're going to submit electronically. And you don't know what version of Word they're going to have and how it's going to look. So not going all the way to the bottom is a good thing. And also, that's another reason why the type of paper used, really not important. They're going to make multiple copies anyway. It may be no one ever sees the original.
Yeah.
So don't spend a lot of money on linen or anything like that.
And no clouds.
Oh, definitely not.
I remember
dogs.
We're both old enough to remember when that was the rage in resumes, because you wanted to get yourself out there. People would spray them with their perfume and cologne. Yes. In the late 80s, late 80s, early 90s, this was a fad.
Now we're dating ourselves.
Well, I'm sorry. I got gray hair. I'm proud to have every one of them.
Yeah, we are.
But yeah, so that was a thing, and occasionally we still get something like that, and I'm thinking, what are they trying to do? If it comes in on flowers and clouds and all this kind of stuff, and
they're going to go in the big pile or no pile.
Actually, they go in the round pile. We're just like, no.
So under content, it's going to depend on what you're applying for to which of those categories that you use and how much you put under each one. But again, if you use the Vita and you have that option, you can put more stuff there. But some things that I don't see as often are, the employment and education, those are pretty standard. But the honors and awards or committee work or outside, later it'll be service outside of where you work. So for those in academia, like being an external reviewer or something like that is real important. But the main thing is you're wanting to address what the requirements and the preferred comments were in the job ad, any way that you can. Some of that, this section will apply more once you have your job and you're moving up. You certainly want to include your professional organization memberships and anything you did on those, even if it was as a member. That's still important. That means that you didn't just pay your dues and do nothing, that you actually served. And so you can call yourself a member and then have listed under it what you did as a member. But try to volunteer for committees because that looks even better. Of course, you have your publications, your presentations. And what my graduate students have been surprised with year after year is listing professional development. Yeah, they want to see that you would show them you're willing to continually learn. I just split my infinitive. It's Kentucky education at work.
That's acceptable now.
But yeah, like to boldly go.
Yeah, exactly.
But list those conferences and those workshops and all those things you attend. And that's where that calendar idea comes in, because I might remember that I went somewhere, but I may not remember when it was. Save your programs. You know, now that things are more electronic than they used to be, that's somewhat easier, but go ahead and print it off. That website might disappear. And keep that.
And include webinars in that. I know if you work for the UK system, there are always webinars that the library is paying for or the school is paying for you to do. Go to that and take notes and ask questions. But that's, in this tight economic time and with the technology we have, that's the way we're going to be doing a lot more training. So make sure you include it. So everything you get a chance to go, ask your supervisors, can I go to this? And then make a note and go to it. And
the more training you attend,
yes.
whether it's in person or virtual, the more you're going to be able to do yourself, because you've had examples, good and bad, of how that's been carried out. That's how I learned information literacy, was as a staff person. I was in reference, I got to teach, but at first I was required to shadow and assist before I could teach. And of course I was just happy to be able to do it, but what I learned were I saw good examples and I saw examples that I could learn from in a different way, you know, what not to do. So the same is true of the workshops and webinars. We're going to go on to cover letter. Does anybody have questions?
Yes.
I was just going to go back to your file type. You were talking about the different versions of Word. Would you ever suggest using and sending a PDF?
Yes, I would. I would also default to RTF, rich text format, because every Word reader from Open Office, any of the versions of Word, you know, there are some people who still use Word Perfect, although we want them to go away. Because that's a terrible file type to get back to open up in your Word, but RTF is the best. Everything reads it, so PDF is next. You got to be kind of careful with PDF because some organizations don't spring, believe it or not, for everybody to have a PDF reader on their machine. So if you send them a PDF and they can't read it, then they can't open your file.
Or you could send both.
Yeah, you can send both.
Would it be overkill to send both?
Well, yeah, just look at that one, but just be careful. Those are kind of the two things you want to keep basically ready to go, a PDF version. And with Word, right now, it's really easy. There's that print to PDF.
When you're sending that email, I would always have a sentence in it. Please let me know if you have any trouble opening these documents. I'll be happy to supply additional versions or print versions, whatever you need. I mean, you know you would be, but be explicit.
Be explicit. And actually, this brings up a good point. We can kind of segue into this part. Websites and blogging and Facebooking and Twittering.
Yes.
First thing, be extremely careful, especially at this stage of your careers, about what you say, what you do, who you friend on Facebook. Okay? You know, I'm a full professor, so as long as I don't get too outrageous and call somebody a dirty name and make it libelous for the university, they're not going to get rid of me because I have academic freedom. But earlier in my career, I'd probably been in trouble. Facebook existed back in the 90s because I was running off the mouth sometimes. So you have to be careful with that. Same thing goes with your personal websites. If need be, you might want to have 2 or 3. They're dirt cheap now. A lot of them are free. You might want to have one that you put all your work samples up. So the things you do for class, your presentations, those kinds of things. All the stuff they make you do now for the computer classes. You may want a place where you point to that. And then you might have another one that your mom reads, where you put your pictures of your cat and your dog and and your quilting. Now, those aren't good, but you want to present an image. This comes to mind recently because we had a candidate about a year ago for a job hiring. And, you know, I was like, yeah, she could probably do this job. But during her presentation, she had her website, so she kind of reached a lull in her presentation, so I went and looked at her website. And it was flowing along pretty good there. But I can't say I took offense to what was on her website, what she said, but the way she presented herself as part of a minority group, I thought was a bit tasteless, and how it was driving her. I'm saying that's fine for some personal stuff and talking to people, but when you're looking for a job, you want to control that, because you never know who you're going to, you know, for you guys who know me, know I don't hang out on the Democratic side of the street. So I would make sure there would be nothing on there that would insinuate, upset anybody on either side of the political spectrum, just because that's the image you're trying to project. So you want to kind of be brand neutral at this point.
Just to follow up on that, studies have shown that between 40 and 80% of hiring people, depending upon what industry you're in, will do a Google search on your name and see what they can come up with.
Yep.
I do.
So I highly recommend you go to a computer where you're not logged into anything. You know, you don't have your saved login, and Google yourself and see what comes up. And go to Pinterest, go to Facebook, go to different blogs and see if your name comes up. And because your potential employers will be looking at that.
That's the first thing we do. I was on a search committee when we hired our current dean, Dean Burleson, and we got that whole list of people to apply. That's the first thing I did. I spent a night at my house Googling their names and see what popped up, just to see what was out there and what you could find quick and dirty before I would start looking through them in the library literature. So you just have to be very, very careful with that when it comes to these search committees. You got to remember, we're getting a pile, because you know, when you hire an entry-level librarian, it used to be when we were young librarians, it was not unusual to see maybe 30 or 40 applicants. I could probably see that number doubling. And I've had friends of mine at other institutions talking about, we hired an entry-level librarian, we got 200 applications. 200 applications. And you know, this was kind of a place I was thinking that I wouldn't want to live there. And I suspect most folks in that pile probably didn't want to live there, but they needed a job.
And remember that things like Facebook have shifting privacy, so you can block who has access to it, but you also need to go back occasionally and check those, you know, Facebook, Google, Pinterest, check those privacy settings to make sure that
and you might need a separate Facebook account.
Yeah.
A lot of our peers, especially
or,
outside academia, have that.
Our friend Sarah Glassmeyer used to work here. She has Sarah Non-Work Glassmeyer, which is where all her friends hang out. And then she's got her other Facebook that's related to her job. Same thing for Twitter. She's got 2 Twitter accounts. One that's work-related, and the other one that if she knows you, she gives you access to. I mean, just because what she does now, she has to be very cognizant of the image she's projecting.
And I was thinking of Cara, who used to work for the SLA. Since she had a high-profile job working for the CEO of SLA, she had to be very careful. And she was the PR person. She had to be very careful of what she had. So she had variations on her name, but you'd really have to know her to be, to find her. And then she had it set so she wasn't public. But she has to keep going back, like you say, and check the settings of that when the other one is nice and clean, or as clean as Cara can be.
Well, that's the story. And like, once you get a job, like I never friended our HR librarian. Just like, no, that's just a road we don't want to go.
What do you do in the case when they friend you, especially when you're a GA and they're grown-ups and you don't really want to be their friend?
You don't have to be there.
You don't have to respond.
I just leave them in limbo.
Of course you do, Jenny.
You can also friend them and either restrict the access or drop them.
I don't even
They
post
will
anything,
never
but I just
know if they're
Facebook
set. They're Megan could drop me tomorrow and I would never know. She may already have.
She has me.
I can't drop you because there's too many other things that we work together on. It wouldn't work. It would be very unproductive on my part.
But yeah, it's I've gotten to where I don't do things just to be nice anymore. Because I also have pictures of my kids. And so if I don't know you and I don't want you to see my kids, I'm not going to friend you. But professionally, students, I'm more likely to go ahead and say sure. But professionals elsewhere, I've just ignored some. And it's just, yeah. Sometimes that's just the best thing, and I think it's become, people aren't as shocked by it as they used to be. I've got a whole bunch of people on LinkedIn right now that I just don't even play in that playground very much, and I'm not going to go there every week to see who is wanting to link up with me.
LinkedIn's a different kind of beast. I pretty much, if you got some kind of connection, I will accept you in that just because it's a professional place, and I don't conduct my personal business on LinkedIn.
But it's where our corporate librarians and government librarians and especially nonprofits, that's their world.
Yeah, that's what they do all their work there.
Oftentimes, Facebook is blocked in their organization, but LinkedIn may not be.
So so if you don't have a LinkedIn account, that's one tip you might want to start going.
And you can create sort of a resume there.
You can post a resume, and it can be your professional place. This is when you put on your interview suit, go get your picture taken, or have somebody do it, and that's what you put in the corner.
Yeah.
And have it there. And then you can have your tattooed drunken self on your Facebook account. Okay.
Wait, what is
Stop tagging me.
Oh, that's rule number 2. No tagging.
What are your thoughts on including an image of yourself? I've heard kind of both sides of that. I mean, because it can be used to judge you. I mean, whether it's positive or negative.
It can. That's totally up to the individual.
I would think there's, if it was between having a somewhat professional looking image of you or no image, it's going to raise more questions having no image.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean on the resume or on
LinkedIn?
Yeah, on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn.
Yeah. Resumes, no, not even put a picture on it. That's from the 50s, because they actually used to do that.
Right.
Or my favorite Bill Clinton.
hobbies.
Can I tell my favorite Bill Clinton story?
Yes.
No, I don't want to tell it.
Sean, ask yourself the question, is it socially acceptable?
It is, because it's a prime example of this whole picture thing.
Then there you go.
Well, when Mr. Clinton left office, one of the universities in New York City did a study, and they sent pictures with the resume, the exactly same resume, and he picked the one that was the attractive redhead instead of the other one. So that's just kind of a cautionary tale. I mean, it's totally up to you, but again, it goes to that professional look. Do I want this here or not have this here?
I
Okay.
picked the attractive redhead too, probably.
Would have helped later. But so that's the thing you have to be careful with, because you can't really control. People are going to abuse it. You just have to figure out do what you're comfortable with and what your goals and aims or what you want to do are. Okay.
Do you want to finish up?
I'm trying to think. Is there anything else?
There was the cover letter. Well, it's as simple as make sure you address all the job requirements and preferences possible. Do not assume that if you've spelled it out in one document that they're going to read that. Don't assume they're going to read both. So do it in the cover letter, do it in your resume or vita, and link them. And if you are substituting something, you think this works or fits something, but it's not an exact one-to-one correspondence of your experience in that, spell it out. And just explain how that what you're saying is why you think that you are an excellent candidate for this position. And don't hesitate from saying you're an excellent candidate for this position. Make sure you're the right position name too.
Yeah,
I've seen some sloppiness.
Yeah, because people have cut and paste and they've not changed it. They've done it. See, and Debbie, this goes to your point when you were talking about what to include. The cover letter is the perfect place to put the extras, where you can explain what you did. So this might be a place where you would talk about the undergraduate experience or your management experience at McDonald's. And if I could find a librarian with that management experience at McDonald's, I'd hire them in a heartbeat, because they have dealt with irate people and they know how to get things out the door and be pleasant to folks most of the time. So that's where you would kind of beef up all that stuff that you think, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I'm applying at the Library of Congress. Well, yes, it does, and that's where you would put in a cover letter. Speaking of cover letters, the other thing that's kind of interesting about this day and age is that all these electronic submission things. Here at University of Kentucky, we use electronic submission. The library particularly does for every job that comes along, faculty included. So you have to be also kind of careful about how that's going to parse your documentation and how it's going to display when we go to print it out. So it's one of those things you kind of check in your head, read the ad, and they'll tell you, you can yes, send us a letter and a resume, or no, don't send us and go to this website and fill out this form that's 2 hours long.
And
I don't
if
know
they
if you
say
guys
do
did
it,
that for your last, did you use it for your last hires here, Wade?
I don't really know.
Okay,
Because
because
everybody does it differently, and
Yeah.
it's important to know how people do it.
Yeah.
And it's
You're-
important to, I mean, that's like the first step. Can you follow? Can you do what I'm asking you to do?
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you can't, then you're out the door.
Well, and I actually had that written down here because why so many people don't. And that goes all the way to addressing it to the proper persons with the proper titles. And even if it doesn't have their title there, take 2 seconds and look them up on the
Google.
web. You know, get it right. And I don't think Shawn or I would be terribly offended if you elevated us or lowered our rank, but take the time to try
Yeah,
to
show
get
some
that
thought.
right. Yeah. That may make that difference.
And also with cover letters and that kind of stuff, pay attention to where you're applying, because I once applied for a job at Virginia Military Institute, which is, you know, the military school and that. So I was very cognizant to make sure I wrote all my dates and how the military does it, which is day, month, year, and all those kinds of things. I made sure I used everybody's titles, because they are not professors, they're colonel, lieutenant colonel, captain. And that shows attention to detail and things that you're paying attention to and you're doing. So you get those kind of little things, again, we hate to get you in that small pile because somebody's going to say, hey, they know how our culture works. We're going to give them another look.
Do you want to hit the interview for
Yeah,
all
let's
your
talk,
search?
let's talk about
He's been on more search committees.
Search committees. Let's see. Valerie has a nice start, so we don't on the back.
They don't have that.
They don't have that one?
No,
I have
no.
that one. Okay.
You have it.
We'll fix that, set that up. So anyway, I guess the first thing you need to remember about searching, when you've made it to the small pile and get interviewed, wear your best clothes, dress up, call mom and dad, call spouses, call partners, whoever you need to borrow money from to get that one good interview suit. Okay, and of course the correct shoes. Because even though we're technically legally not supposed to do that, people do that. They may not write that on the form that they got rid of you for that, but it was running around in the back of their heads.
What's that first impression?
Yeah,
It then
yes.
affects how they say, how they feel about everything that happens from that second forward.
Yes, you remember the candidate we had on stockings and sandals. And that was all he talked about in the library. The fact that she had on socks and stockings.
That seems right up the alley of the
You might think, but that's all we talked about.
And you're not dressing for the position that you are applying for. You're dressing
For
above
that
that.
next one.
you know,
That's
so.
probably the best tip. You're dressing for that next job. And no, I'm not bucking to be dean of libraries today, so I don't want that job. But that's what you want to do. Some other things that are important on this list, we've talked about it. Make sure you're prepared. Do your homework. When you get that first email or that phone call that says you've made it to the second stage, that's when you go and apply your superior searching skills and read everything you can about the place you're going. Not just the university or the corporation, but the city and the state. So you can have an intelligent conversation and you can make comparisons to what you're doing to what they're doing. Okay?
But it's probably more and more, it's a series of
Yes,
conversations.
yes, it is.
If you're going to be picked up at the airport, you've got to have some chit chat
Mhm.
to and from there.
Well, it starts before that. A lot of places now, because of the cost, are
That's
doing
right.
Skype interviews or phone interviews.
Yeah.
And so if you just go in with just answering your questions in 3 or 4 sentences, I will say, okay, well, that was a good answer, but that person gave me not 20 minutes of prose talking about how great Lexington is, but they could converse about it or ask intelligent questions about it. We'll go up a little bit higher in the search committee's steps when you do that.
Because you look like you're more interested in the position. You're more serious about it.
The other thing, so we talked about that. Also ask about a schedule when you get that next step. Ask for that schedule or as soon as you can. And speaking of time, it is quite all right for you to ask, when do you expect to fill this job? Okay? A lot of people kind of shy away from that and think they're being rude. No. It's quite all right to ask that question. You want to see what kind of timetable. You want to put your life on hold and miss like 2 or 3 other great jobs in a place you'd rather be because you're waiting on this one place. So that's that question. So it's also kind of easily to ask those questions too. How much are you paying? Again, that's
And benefits.
and benefits. Do you have spousal partner placement? Do you have family educational things? All those things are important to you. Ask those questions. And some of this you should have found out when you did your research about this place. I think the thing that young librarians forget to do, because we've seen this when they come to interviews, they haven't done the research on whether it's a tenured place, how much benefit packages, what they are. And it also gives you an idea about what's going on in the market. Yes, they'll pay me $10,000 less in this other place, but look how much they're contributing to my retirement. I don't pay a lick for health care. So then I will take that $10,000 pay cut because all this other stuff that I would pay for out of that $10,000 is given to me.
Or the cost of living is so
Yeah,
different.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, cost of living is so different.
You got a question?
Just so you guys kind of just addressed this, but you often hear have a couple of questions to ask
Yes.
when you're being interviewed. Do you have recommendations on what sorts of questions candidates should ask or should not ask?
Don't ask me about on a date.
Really? Come on.
No, I've been interviewed and
Oh, God.
I've had to, yeah, it was really bad. So don't do that.
Don't ask about other candidates.
Yes, don't.
We had someone for a collection manager position, and I got this because I was on PT committee, and we met with him, and he wanted to know if we were interviewing a certain other candidate, and clearly he had problems with that person.
Yes.
And I just thought he sounded like a nut from there on.
Yeah,
You know?
don't do that. Do not do that. I mean,
It
it's
should be common
Yes.
sense, but I could see where it would be someone that you look up to and you want to know. You shouldn't be asking about other candidates, but I would think you'd have some general questions about the city. Ask them what they like about that area, what they like about the university. You know, those kinds of conversations. Not just to have the questions ready, but I would think that the answers would be interesting.
yes, you need to be a sterling conversationalist. I mean, literally. And that's part of having all those questions. Yes, sir.
I actually have to go interview someone.
Okay.
But,
Let me come with you. I'll take a higher one.
I will, I'd like to plug American Libraries. They have an article on branding yourself that I think
Yes.
is very relevant to this conversation and something everyone should read who's on the market right now. That it might not all be about the library glasses. Think about what you present, not only in all of
yeah.
these venues, but think about the job you want and brand yourself that way.
Yeah.
It's worth a read. Unfortunately, I don't have copies.
It's in American Libraries. I don't know.
Thanks.
I'm trying to think what else on this about the
Do you think it's appropriate to ask if they support professional development
Yes,
opportunities?
it's extremely important to ask that
You
question.
need to know that answer.
Yes, and if they say no, walk out the door. That's
Right.
important.
Yeah,
I
don't.
mean, don't take the job.
I would also say trust your gut. If it seems like people in the room are really unhappy, it may not be the right time to be there.
Yeah, you're not correct. We actually had a candidate when Valerie we worked together in reference. She was perfect. She was a graduate of this program. And before her interview was over, she told the HR person, I can't work here. I just met that department. They're all unhappy. And she cut her interview off right there. So that's a very valid point then.
And we were.
We were, extremely. I mean, she picked up on it. I'm trying to think, was there anything else on interviews that you talked about that? You're going to get some sleep because it is going to be a long, long day. Sometimes it's going to be a long 3 days. Depends on where you go and how you're going to.
And so then you're looking at your clothes for 3 days.
Yes.
And think about, just like the advice I give for conferences, take multiple pairs of shoes. Think about that for the interviews. This sounds trivial, but yet if you're not comfortable,
It's going to come
you're not
across
going to
there.
perform as well. And it is a performance.
And I guess the thing that has come back into vogue, well, actually it hasn't, and I just read an article about this. Thank everyone you meet and write thank you notes. It doesn't have to be on a nice
Now it's
card.
unique.
Yeah, it is very unique. If it's an email, I just remember the last committee I was on, I was blown away. The 2 candidates actually sent us thank you notes, personalized ones to all the committee members. And I was like, well, I hadn't seen one of these in 5 or 6 years.
And that's easier if you're collecting cards as you go along, or at least making notes of who people are. Thank the person who picked you up at the airport. Thank the key person in each group that you meet with.
And speaking of cards, have your own
Yes.
with like your personal email, phone number, website where they can get a hold of you.
Not cutesy.
Yeah, please not cutesy. Very professional, very business. You may not have a logo for your organization, but kind of just something draws the time, but very plain and black and white, so it's easily decipherable. Can be scanned into one of those little card readers. I'm trying to think of anything else about search.
I have a question about
Yes, sir.
that. I've seen in our system some faculty candidates have to give presentations. Does the candidate usually kind of decide that based on what they feel the job's going to be like, or that's something the committee asks about, like it gives them a topic?
Here and at most academic places, it's a topic they assign you.
But
so
it
you
can
do
be
that.
sort of broad.
It can be broad.
Oh.
So in my experience, there's three kinds. There's one where they want you to do a think piece, and that's to see if you read and you're thinking about the profession. And then there's another presentation where they want you to come and teach abbreviated class. And like if you're going to apply for a professor's job on this campus, you end up doing both because they want you to see a class and they also want to see if you're thinking about that one. Not in the library, but the teaching faculty. Or occasionally I have heard of places they give you a really, really broad thing, like the future of reference, which is really too big a think piece or anything. And people want to see how you parse that down to something manageable for 30 minutes. So it's a question you should ask. I've been on a couple of interviews where I didn't have a presentation. It was just meeting people all day long, and that was very tiring.
But usually there is.
Yeah, there usually is.
But even within a topic,
Yeah.
you can usually
Yeah.
narrow it a bit and tailor it to what you can talk about and what you're comfortable with. And most of what I've seen are still PowerPoints. There's occasional Prezis, but the rule in Prezi, don't make your
Don't make
audience
people
sick.
I would say
Some
with-
people
yeah.
still are not used to watching a Prezi yet. They're used to seeing a PowerPoint. And I think that's okay, unless you are emerging technologies librarian or something. Then you might want to show off a little bit.
And I might be wary of Prezi because not everywhere has the most up-to-date flash.
Yeah,
If
that's
you've
true.
done a Prezi, it packs it down, but it needs self-contained
Mhm.
flash, but it needs a certain version. And speaking of PowerPoint, there are a couple of books I want you guys to go read. One is called Beyond Bullet Points. It's a very good presentation book. It's on its third or fourth edition right now. I cannot remember the author, so shame on me, bad librarian Shawn. The other one is Slideology. And I can't remember that author either, but my friend Constance, who some of you met a couple of years ago, told me about this because she just met the author of that recently. It's called Slideology. And what they both tell you to do is presentations that are very visually geared. The kind of thing that you want to do is say we're talking about the future of reference. We may find a nice image that represents that's projected behind us, and we're talking about it.
But it doesn't list every point.
Yes, I get kind of nervous when I see a candidate with every point they're reading off on the screen like this. Yeah, I'm scared. They might be the best person on the face of the planet. Probably could teach us a stone to read or to find the
What
information
about
article.
when you hand out slides? I
don't hand out
was
slides anymore.
on a search committee, and to me that just, you're going to read ahead and then you're not going to pay attention.
Yeah, don't hand out slides either.
Do it at conferences if you want. I wouldn't do it in a job
Yeah.
interview.
Okay.
I also think that some of the bullet points are more forgivable in a conference setting,
Yes.
but not in an interview.
And speaking of the handout, you may want to have a front and back sheet with like your main points, any articles you read preparing for that, any book recommendations, suggested readings, and take that with you on the interview. And so if anybody asks, oh, I would like to get a copy of your reading list, well, here you go. This is what I read for this, and then you're done. And you don't have people in the back of the room reading and flipping. And that's the most amazing thing about interviews and do that, because you hear it at 1 second, this sound, and everybody turns the
Yeah.
page. And it's like, whoa.
And I would ask, as far as not just in dealing with the topic, when you find out about the topic, I would want to know who's going to be in the audience, who am I
Mhm.
talking to,
Mhm.
and check on the equipment.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't wait to show up for that.
Tell
And-
them what you need beforehand. When you make that call for your interview, tell them what you're going to need
Yeah.
at that point.
It's their job, really,
Yeah.
to provide it. But just be clear, software,
Mhm.
version, whatever. And probably obvious, but hopefully, but if not, then add practice routine questions with a peer.
Time it. That's another thing, time it.
And stand up and do your presentation.
Yes. Yeah, stand up for your presentation, time it. Videotape it if you want, so you can watch yourself. Do not go over the time limit. When somebody tells you to do we have a verb in the library, which I'll tell you guys off camera about that. If they tell you that you have a 30-minute presentation, what that usually transmits to that you have 15 to 20 minutes to talk, 10 minutes for questions. So even though they give you 30 minutes, I probably wouldn't use all 30 minutes. You want to give time for people to talk to you. And speaking of time, here's the thing that I see candidates not doing a lot. Carve out time for yourself. So what I mean for that, ask for a bathroom break. Because we're going to rush you through. We're trying to get you through. We got 6 other people to see in the next 3 weeks. Ask for a bathroom break. Check the schedule, see if there's scheduled breaks. If you can arrange it, talk to the person who's making your schedule, says, hey, I would really like a break after talking to this committee. Can we do 30 minutes here? You know, those schedules aren't in stone because you're interviewing a person and they're interviewing you. So make sure you kind of carve out that time, because you can be doing great, and that one break that you miss is when you fall apart because you're just beat. You can't go any longer.
And I'm not sure that our former HR person ever did that, ever added it intentionally. I think it was mainly at the request. I mean, her focus was getting the candidate to all the people she needed to, but she didn't always think about the candidate. And I have a feeling that's not unusual. She might have.
Yes, you have to carve that time out for yourself, you know. So that might mean arriving earlier to the interview. They'll pay for it. You can walk around the campus. That may mean leaving later. You may leave the day after it if you can afford it or if they're willing to pay for it. Just so you have a little time to reflect on it. During the day of the interview, it might mean, I know, making weird time. That's all right. The two of us like to talk. So
I know. Are there any other last burning questions that anyone has?
Well, this is in relation to Facebook. You mentioned be careful of your Facebook friends, and you really can't control what other people post. So, because people do post extensive amounts of information. So, what did you mean by that? Your Facebook friends.
Just, I'm not telling you to curtail your friends. There are ways where you can go in and set what appears on your stream or not, on your timeline with other people. So I would make sure you go check those and make sure those things that you may not or may agree with but may be offensive to somebody else don't pop up in your timeline. Because usually when somebody searches your Facebook and they're not a friend of yours, they get that timeline and that's it. So you want to make sure what pops up on that thing that says started in 2007. I forgot what the setting is because they just changed it in the last 3 to 4 months.
They keep changing.
Yeah, they keep changing. Where you can go in and check what appears in your timeline. Because right now I think I have mine set that pretty much only things I post go on my timeline.
But also have it set so that you're notified every time that you're tagged and every time that you're mentioned, so that you can see those, and if you need to fix something, you can fix it.
Yes.
Yeah, I have mine set to where you have to approve your activity.
Yes.
And if I check it on my phone, it automatically gets approved. But if I check it on a computer, I have to approve that activity going to my page first.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a difference between what your phone settings are and your computer settings are as well.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, what would you think if you went to look at someone's Facebook or Google Plus or whatever, and it's just totally locked down from outside view? Would you think that, what do they have to hide, or would you not consider it?
I think they're smart, very security conscious. They are monitoring their online profile, and that's one of the best things you can do as a young career librarian right now. Just because the proliferation of places where you can put information and people can put information about you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
I mean, for me at least, I think I wouldn't want to work for a place that would think I was suspicious anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things.
That's another thing, yeah. Just always run that through, and that's what I meant by kind of follow your gut. Is if you get an odd sense that they're not going to support your professional development, or they're asking questions that are too close to that edge of what even may be legal,
yes,
may not be the right place.
You guys do know what the not legal questions are.
I have a
What's
question
your
about
age?
that.
Are you married? Do you have kids?
Exactly.
How do you?
There are ways to ask that.
Yeah.
I was going to say
It's
when
not
it's
good.
when it's a position where you are you go to dinner with them and you
Mhm.
have those sort of social gatherings, and it's asked inadvertently. How do you
Yeah.
address that
Well-
without making yourself sound like,
If it was inadvertent,
you know?
I think you can probably pick out when it's on purpose and when it's inadvertent, because sometimes those things come up in the flow of conversation.
Mhm.
And I would say if it came up during the flow of conversation, I wouldn't take offense to it. But if they started the conversation with, so, do you plan to have children? We're a very family-friendly place. You're thinking, that's none of your business.
I don't think, I would take offense to it, but I mean, me personally, I might respond with an answer they might take offense to.
Well, then then you have to do
You
that.
know,
But,
so how
So
do
maybe you don't want to do that.
yeah, you don't want to do that. But see, that's the
Unless
very
you're
blatant.
testing.
Yeah, that's a very blatant thing if they ask you that question. So, when do you
Mhm.
plan on having children,
Mhm.
or are you having children? That's none of.
How old are your
Or
children?
how old are your
Yeah.
children? That doesn't matter. But if they start talking about the school systems and all that, then indicate that's not crossing the line because they're just telling you about the community and that kind of stuff.
But you still don't know what they're going to go
Yeah.
back and share.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to ask.
Ask.
Mhm.
So.
Oh, and like my favorite is, tell me about yourself. And that's a great way to get you to start talking about things they can't ask.
Yeah, because
you
here's the
Yeah.
thing. But that's the thing. Tell us about your hobby. All that's perfectly legal, and it's part of how you select candidates. You want to figure out what they do, what they like, and all those kinds of things. But it's up to the candidate, you guys at that point, to draw what you share.
And think about that intentionally.
Yes.
That's what I meant by the practice.
Mhm.
It's both the casual questions and the where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or, I mean, I'm assuming at this point you know that if they ask you what, the strengths are easy, should
Mhm.
be. But if they ask you about your deficits, you never really tell them
No.
that we've had that. But, but you don't. You say, well, I wish I knew more about
X.
such and such
Mhm.
program, but I know I can teach myself that
Mhm.
because I've already learned X, Y, and Z. There's so much you can do with software in that, or a different skill or something. But you really, that's how you turn it to a strength. I think it's been more staff positions where people have been brutally honest.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah. There are times when brutally honest is good. My job interview is not one of them. Okay, but I'm not advocating that you lie, but massage the truth to your benefit. All right, Megan wants us to stop.
You know what? You enjoy making me the bad guy, but thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.